Good evening. Good evening, Eleanor. How are you? Good. Okay, welcome to this evening's Bhagavad Gita, as it is. We are currently on chapter 10, and within chapter 10, which is 9 and 10 are really the heart of Gita. We're in the heart of the heart. Verses 8 through 11. We'll discuss a little bit. We'll read them again and discuss a little bit about that. And then if you have any questions, of course, please feel free to ask at any point in time. So before we begin the Gita, I'll do the invocation mantras, which are in our Bhakti tradition, our Bhakti Yoga tradition. We demonstrate our gratitude and respect to our teachers. There are different types of teachers according to the Bhakti tradition. Those that connect you to the Supreme and those that give you instructions on how to attain your eternal relationship with the Supreme. So to those personalities that are inspiring us on our path, we offer our respects through these mantras. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Vistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapudantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nibashesha Shunvadi Pastityade Shutane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. those mantras always move me. You think about how, when you have the good fortune, the great fortune of meeting someone like A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, you can't measure the fortune of such a meeting. It's not by chance, and it also is a inroad to the progression on your spiritual path. So if you have that desire, that the strong desire to progress in your spirituality, having the inclination towards progressing, and having the feeling of wanting to experience fulfillment, not just sparks of happiness here and there, but a sense of fulfillment within the heart. And when somebody gives you that opportunity, of course, we must demonstrate our gratitude. So those mantras in the beginning are particularly significant, whether you know them or not. The effects of just meditating on that personality who has or is giving you guidance is complete in and of itself. So thank you for your attention to those mantras while I chant them. Greatly appreciate it. So we're going to begin again. We're on the 10th chapter. We're at the heart of the Gita right now, and these verses 8, 9, 10, and 11. Very significant verses. But I have to get to the 10th chapter first. I was in the 11th chapter. Okay, here we go.
Lakshmi, may I?
Okay. The opulence of the absolute. Chapter 10, text 8. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Text 9. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. And text 10. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And text 11. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So these 4 verses are considered the heart of the Gita. And certainly if you're reading a Gita that is a bhakti rendition, or for instance, my lineage is Bhakti Yoga, and my teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, is a preeminent scholar and sage in that tradition. So as I've spoken to you before, Sanskrit is a very complicated language, and it's highly contextual. But in this case, you read the Sanskrit and you see, aham sarvasya prabhavo. So aham means I. So Krishna is definitely speaking about him. Aham sarvasya. Sarvasya means all. So Krishna is definitely saying here, according to the Sanskrit rendition, I am the source of everything. And this is not surprising, because if you've been with me more or less throughout our readings, you'll see in other pages. So here, aham is translated as I, sarvasya, of all. Prabhava means source of generation, that which things come from. Matak, from me. Sarvam, everything. Pravartate, emanates. Iti, thus. Matva, knowing. Bhajanti, becomes devoted. Mam, unto me. Buddha, learn it. Bhava samanvitaha, with great attention. So you see, even in the word for word translation, of course, when they're combined, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada translates, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds, everything. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this perfectly engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Like I said, this should be no surprise to you, because all through the Gita, we've read in different sections of the Gita where things are similarly expressed by either Krishna. There's, as I said before, there's two sets of dialogue going on in the Gita. Predominantly, it's Krishna and Arjuna having this dialogue, but secondarily, there's a dialogue between Sanjay, the teacher of Dhritarashtra, who is the king. And he is the blind king whose sons are opposing Krishna, Arjuna, and his four brothers. So those two dialogues between Sanjaya and Dhritarashtra and Krishna, Arjuna, many times it is mentioned Krishna's position. So the Gita is explicitly a yoga book. And yoga is meant to connect one to the Supreme. So it is a yoga book in that it provides the knowledge and the philosophy and the knowledge and the understanding that who or what are we connecting to when we say yoga is the connective science, connecting the soul to the Supreme. So herein, very clearly, Krishna is establishing his divinity. We've discussed before, as you may know, that there are different references to divinity, absolute divinity, God, in various Vedic texts. And depending on the perspective, the vision of the translator, you will get their translation in reference to one of those perspectives of God. And we've talked about in the Bhagavad Purana, it says that God has three main features. The impersonal Brahman, Brahman meaning vastness, so this spiritual energy, anti-material energy, as Prabhupada talks about in his Beyond Birth and Death book, that he, it's an excerpt of some of his writings. And so you have that, and if someone comes from that particular lineage, whose main meditation is on the Supreme in that feature, so you're going to get in your Gita, you're going to get more reference to the Supreme as impersonal than you will as the Supreme as the personality, because that particular lineage, the lineage which professes that the absolute is impersonal, does not accept a personal feature of the Supreme. So that's why in those translations of the various Gitas that are out there, you can tell what lineage the translator is coming from simply by how he sees Krishna. And that, there are many stories. When Krishna was leaving Vrindavan with Balaram, and he was on his way to deal with the rogue king Kangsa. Kangsa had planned this wrestling event in this great arena, great stadium, hoping to draw Krishna into that arena, and therefore he could kill him and his brother Balaram. So the reason I'm bringing this Leela up, this pastime up, is because when Krishna entered the arena, it's described there, that there are all kinds of people there, thousands of people were in attendance at this great wrestling match. And based on the relationship they had with the Supreme, based on their meditation on an aspect of the Supreme, when Krishna walked into the arena, that personality who had a relationship or an understanding or the perspective that the Supreme was Brahman, when Krishna walked into the arena, saw the effulgent Brahman. That's what they saw. The yogis who meditate on the divinity within the heart, Paramatma or Super Soul, when Krishna walked into the arena, those yogis saw that forearm feature of the Super Soul within the heart, the divinity within the heart. And those who worshipped and meditated upon the Supreme Personality called Krishna or Vishnu, again, depending on the relationship, there is reciprocation, and Krishna appeared to them in that way. So this is one little excerpt from the Bhagavad Purana, which demonstrates how God can appear to different people in different ways according to their approach. As they surrender unto me, Krishna says, I reciprocate, I reward accordingly. So in other words, if you're surrendering through the Jnana Yoga process, which is mentioned here in the Gita, Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, if you are surrendering in that way, the Jnana Yoga process can only reveal Brahman, cannot reveal any other aspect of divinity. If you are, according to the 6th chapter of the Gita or the Yoga Sutras, Dhyana Yoga, the Dhyana Yoga approach or the yoga of meditation, which is a subcategory of Jnana Yoga. So there are, similarities in approach, but the dhyanis are there. The whole purpose of their meditation, their whole purpose of their yoga, rather, is to meditate on divinity within the heart and the true nature, the spiritual nature of the self. And then the devotees, that's why, so when Krishna is saying here, devote yourself to me, worship me, etc., I'll respond to you accordingly by giving you realization of me not as an ordinary person, Krishna meaning Krishna, not as an ordinary person, but as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God. So Krishna establishes his divinity conclusively in the various verses of the Bhagavad Gita. He establishes supremacy as the supreme deity from which all others emanate. Further, he establishes his supremacy as the supreme deity from which all other perceptions of divinity emanate. Specifically, using the word, I believe it's in the 10th chapter here that we're reading, Deva Deva Jagatpate. Deva Deva. Deva Deva. Deva Deva means God of all gods. So, some people in their approach, they think that, there are many gods. There's Shiva and Brahma and Agni and Vayu and Varuna and Surya, etc. And there are many, many different gods. And then you approach one of these gods, and then by doing so, you'll become purified, and then you'll enter into Brahman, and all of these gods will disappear. That's the Brahman, or the impersonal, or the Jnana Yoga perspective of how to approach. So these personalities, doesn't matter. That's why you'll hear sometimes people will say or write, it doesn't matter which God you approach, because the ultimate issue is to get purified to the point of realizing that it is all one. That is the Jnana Yoga perspective. Whereas Krishna says something entirely different in the Gita. And if we study the Gita with great determination and scrutiny, we'll see in the second chapter of the Gita, the very first thing, the very first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna is na tvevaham jatu nasam na twang name janadipa na chaiva na bhavishyama sarva vayam ataparam. So the very first thing he says, never was there a time, now listen to this carefully, when I did not exist, Krishna, nor you, Arjuna, nor all these kings, in reference to the kings that are on the battlefield, but it's in reference to all living entities, or in any time shall they cease to be. So this kind of statement initially in the Gita is indicating that there is separate, individual, eternal, fully cognizant, blissful entities that are in relationship to the supremely Sat-Chit Ananda, eternal, knowledgeable, and blissful living entity. And Krishna says that individuality always exists. The analogy which is used is that of a diamond. If you have a diamond, or if you've at least seen a diamond, you'll know that a diamond can reflect different colors, right? It has the spectrum of color, and sometimes it can reflect yellow or red or blue or green. So that one clear gem can reflect different colors. So the one supreme can reflect differently to different personalities, different perspectives, those that are meditating through a specific yoga system, and then have revealed to them this particular aspect or manifestation of divinity. So that's important to know, because when we say you have to establish, and we talk about yoga and peace and bliss and happiness and all these things that are quite naturally attractive to us because they're intrinsic to our true nature. Yoga is meant to clarify our perspective so that we know what we are actually meditating upon. Not that it's just, kind of whimsical or however you may do it or wherever your mind may go. No, yoga is a science, the science of yoga, just like you have the science of Ayurveda. They're two sciences, which gives us a working understanding of the nature of the body and the mind and how to bring it into balance. And yoga is the working of the spiritual self in relationship to this world around us and how to bring it into its eternal relationship with the Supreme. So they're actually exacting sciences. They're not whimsical or, do whatever you want to do. The whole process is very specific. It is a system or it is a discipline. And it gives us the opportunity through the systematic or disciplined approach in our practice, our yoga practice. It gives us opportunity to reconnect with the Supreme, the soul and the Supreme Soul gives opportunity to connect. And that connection will afford us the ultimate ultimate potential. What is our ultimate potential? Now, from the Gita's perspective, our ultimate potential is to become a lover of God. And how do we do that? When we engage in a loving relationship with God, then everything is brought to clarity, to clear perspective when we do that, right? Sometimes we get very bewildered in this world. We don't know our purpose, our purpose in life, and we have various relationships. We have a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife or a friend. And sometimes those relationships become very bewildering to us. And sometimes they gladden us, and sometimes they make us very sad and very distressed. The relationship with the Supreme helps us to see everything in proper perspective, to keep our eye on the ball, so to speak, while we are going through the various challenges in life. That is what is incorporated within the body of knowledge and realization that we are trying to obtain in the study of the Gita, and not only the study of the Gita, in discussions about the Gita, discussions about things that are spoken. Because you see here, the 8th verse is, I am the source of everything. Krishna says that. But what does it say in the next verse, 9? The thoughts of one who is pure. So it means the whole practice of yoga, bhakti yoga, whatever yoga system, that the practice is called sadhana. That means practice. That means the system or the discipline that you are putting into perspective, right? You're putting that into proper perspective. And when you put it into proper perspective, the system or discipline, you follow step by step, and you keep on that. Let's have it for example. That I once studied in the 80s. I studied neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which is the science of the relationship between mind and linguistics or speech. In other words, how you can systematically speak about certain things and it'll cause a reaction within the mind and vice versa. Changes in the mind will cause the way you speak. In other words, if you have a negative narrative going on in your mind, then you'll speak like that. You'll say demeaning things about yourself, and you'll think in that particular way, and it'll come out in a particular way. So the whole idea of sadhana is to cultivate a mindset that does not fall prey to the various weaknesses that are there within the conditioned mind, but actually to purify to the point where we transcend our weaknesses. And even if we retain some of them, eventually through the process of purification, which comes through the practice, the sadhana, the chanting, the discussion, like here in the 9th verse, what does Krishna say? Thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. So cultivating the thought process in relationship to the Supreme. Their lives are fully devoted to me. They derive great satisfaction. So this kind of interaction and cultivation of reading texts like Bhagavad Gita. It's not an ordinary book. One thing that you will get out of your study of the Bhagavad Gita, if you do it seriously, you'll begin quickly to realize this is not an ordinary book. This book is dynamic, which means it will definitely speak to where you are, where you're at. Just, I don't know how many, I've been reading Bhagavad Gita since 1970 or 71. I don't remember. I was in college. I was either a sophomore or junior when I started my sojourn with the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, at that particular juncture in my life, I didn't know anything. I knew I had a desire, for spirituality. I knew that, but what that meant, didn't know exactly. And therefore, in order to find out, I began my journey. And eventually, the more I read Gita, the more I heard others much more advanced than me speak the Gita and share their realizations, the more I began to speak the Gita with my realizations, the more I began to understand. It opened up to me. The Gita opened up to me and spoke to me in various ways, in particular, specific ways, that what I needed at that particular time. It's like having the best friend, that whenever you need a confidant that's going to listen to you and give you wise advice how to cross over that challenge, that's what the Gita is like. Mahatma Gandhi said as much, whenever he's going through his trials and tribulations, and his life was full of trials and tribulations, he opened the Gita and the Gita spoke to him. So this is not my fantasy, but it is a common realization that a sincere student of the Bhagavad Gita has, that this book is dynamic. It will speak to me. It will give me the kind of directives that I need in order to get by my challenges. So what does this 9th verse also say? Derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another. So there's this kind of sangha that we have, this kind of sharing of the wisdom that we have, is so important to us. If you study, I particularly like this professor out of Yale University. Her name is Dr. Laurie Santos, and there's a professor of psychology out of Harvard named Dan Gilbert. From their perspective, the psychological perspective, if you look at what their research has turned up, it's basically the principles of the yoga system. The importance of community, the importance of meditation, the importance of, not getting lost in long-term goals at the expense of your short-term goals. There's so many things that are there which are consistent with the ancient sacred text and their conclusions and their advice to us in terms of how to experience this bliss, this enlightenment, this experience of santosh, or contentment, fulfillment. You'll see what they are coming up in their research, without fully mentioning God. I mean, Laurie Santos does mention, meditation on God or prayers to God, etc. That is there, but it's certainly not the emphasis in their research, because they're quote unquote scientists, and scientists are supposed to be objective. And once they start mentioning God and pointing us towards God, then they're branded as not objective, but subjective. So, but I find it very, very interesting to see that from what we can do with our material senses and the research that we come up with, I find it very interesting to see that there are parallels for the ancient system of yoga and what it is advising us in terms of how to become happy or satisfied, peaceful, and what the scientists are able to do with their research. So here, derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me, Krishna says in the Gita. So that means all of you who are taking the time and taking advantage of the opportunity, you can enter into the bliss of enlightenment by meditating on the Gita, even if it's one verse a day, and then discussing it. Like when we come online here, and sometimes you'll ask questions, in relationship to what Krishna has said or something that you've been thinking about. So these kinds of exchanges are very healthy for our spiritual growth. Krishna says it right here in the heart of the Gita. Great bliss, and satisfaction, enlightening one another. So I always encourage you, one of the secrets to understanding the Gita is to talk about it, to express your doubts, because according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great master in my bhakti lineage in the 1800s, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that ignorance is dispelled by the light, the illumination of knowledge. So it's not, if we have questions, it's not that we're ignorant, we're intelligent enough to even think, to meditate deeply and to come up with these questions, to recognize what you do not understand about yourself and the nature of the self and your relationship with God. Is very healthy. And here, and when Krishna declares who he is, without flinching, I am the supreme, I am the source. You meditate on that, and then you talk about that, you converse, you exchange about that understanding. And even if you say, oh, humbug, I don't believe this at all, that's also healthy. Then you can express, you can get out why this doesn't seem feasible to you. So in any case, the exploration of the Gita should invoke inquiry. If it's making sense to you, inquiry about the nature of the self and the self's relationship with the absolute self. If it's not making sense to you, then why? Why isn't it making sense to you? And then maybe, just maybe, that one question, that expression of doubt, you'll hear a response that will clear that doubt. And then you can move on to the next rung of your ladder, the ladder that you're climbing towards the top. And in 10, where Krishna says, okay, to those who are constantly devoted by serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So here is the secret of bhakti yoga. The secret of bhakti yoga is it cannot be understood with your intelligence alone. Your intelligence can help you to ask the questions that will clarify. But Krishna herein is saying, just by giving your heart to me, the reciprocation from me to you, Krishna to the living entity, is further and deeper understanding. Further and deeper understanding. So it's not a yoga simply of endeavor, but it is a yoga of grace. It is a yoga that by performing it with the proper mindset, there is a reciprocation that allows us into this mystery, the mystery of the relationship, loving relationship, supreme, divine, loving relationship between the soul and the super soul, the supreme soul. Then text 11, which is the fourth verse and final verse of the Chatur Shloki, or the four heart verses of the Gita. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Again, to get back to the point, it is a yoga of grace. What is a manifestation of the grace coming from the Supreme? Then the ignorance that's there, that's keeping us in darkness about ourselves, about our interaction with the world, our search, our journey for connection with the Supreme. By our endeavor, by that endeavor, there's illumination. Illumination comes. The shining lamp of knowledge is given by the Supreme within the heart. So these are the four Chatur Shloki, or four verses, main verses of the Gita. Does anyone have any, before we move on, does anyone have any question or comment about this? About these four verses? Number one, Krishna's declaration of the supremacy. Number two, that we as yogis, if we engage in meditation and discussion on that principle, there's a great amount of bliss that's derived. The result of that meditation and discussion is Krishna sees that sincerity and gives us realization, revelation about our relationship with him. And then that shining lamp of knowledge is lit by the Supreme. So in those four things. I also wanted to tell you that throughout the Gita, as I mentioned, Krishna says this over and over again in different ways. So I've compiled a few verses for you from the Gita, which kind of underscores 10:8. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, I am the source of all spiritual material worlds, everything emanates from me. If you read in the fourth chapter, there's a series of verses which begins with 5, and Krishna says there, although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. And that's 6. I'm sorry, 6. And 7, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. So there, Krishna is saying, I am a spiritual by nature. I descend in order to help us, to give us the guiding principles that can get us back to our loving relationship with the Supreme. And the secondary effect of that is we become free from distress, anxiety, become truly situated in a shanti, or peaceful state of mind. Then 4th chapter, 8th verse, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion. That's why I come again and again. And then 4th chapter, 9th verse, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world. So here, this verse 9 that we're talking about, the thoughts of my pure devotee dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service. Here, Krishna says the same thing. If you're meditating, trying to understand my true nature, your true nature, and our relationship, in both of these statements, he's saying it's not ordinary. That meditation is a supreme divine meditation, and it will give you clarity of perspective about your life, and about your relationship with the Supreme. And then in the 7th chapter, Krishna says again, which reiterates what he says in the 8th verse here, 10:8, O conqueror of wealth, that's in reference to Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Krishna says that to Arjuna. And then Krishna says again in the 7th chapter of the Gita, O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that is yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. Those in full consciousness of me, this is in 7th chapter 30th, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So we have many challenges in our life. The biggest challenge, folks, is yet to come. And that challenge is, what are we meditating on? What are we thinking on at that time of death? And why is that important? In the 8th chapter of Gita, Krishna says, what you are thinking of at the time of death propels you, the eternal soul, to your next destination. So put that into perspective. What are we putting into our mind? Because whatever we put into our mind is creating samskaras. Samskaras means impressions. And the more we put something into our mind, the deeper that impression becomes. And that impression that's coming from something that you're thinking about, meditating upon. And imagine if you have a negative narrative in your mind and you're thinking over and over again negatively about yourself, negatively about others. That's just making an impression, and the impression's growing deeper and deeper. And then what does it do? It causes your mindset to gravitate negatively towards things. That's what these impressions are doing. Did you ever have something that has occurred to you and you just can't shake it? It's in your mind, you can't get rid of it. Well, what's the definition of depression? Depression is you keep playing the loop that is making you sad. And you play the loop over and over again, and you can't shake free from it. So the initial loop has made you sad, but the playing over and over again of that same loop of negativity or sadness or any other negative mindset keeps you firmly in the grips of it. So that's why putting these impressions in your mind, the impressions that are coming to us from the ancients, sacred wisdom such as this, that's why Krishna says in the 9th verse here that we just read, thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, the supreme positive, because it's supreme love. What can be more positive than love? Love in its purest, most unadulterated, most intimate level. What can be a more positive state of existence? Because what happens when you have something within inside, you project it outside. So if you have this loving, you're cultivating this loving mood in relationship to the Supreme, that's the source of everything, you'll see that love in everything. You'll see it in all other living entities. You'll see it in the beauty of the world. You go to the beach, you see this amazing sunrise day in and day out. Prior to the summer, where it gets really hot, my wife and I were going to the beach every day to do our meditation, our japa meditation. And of course, it is so inspirational. We just take pictures because it's like, oh my God, and you take a picture. And that's exactly right. Why do you have that reaction? Oh my God. Because who's the artist that has created that beautiful panorama? That's why you have that OMG response. So this is the kind of mindset that we are trying to cultivate. It won't happen by going to a psychiatrist and taking drugs. It'll happen by cultivating this supremely loving, positive mindset and create the impressions, deep impressions. Impressions turn into inclinations. Did you ever wonder why you are just like spontaneously attracted or inclined to something? It may be very new. It may be very new, or it may be very, something you just came in contact with. But you find like, I'm really drawn to it. It's because these sanskars, these impressions that are there, if you see something which is akin to that particular kind of impression, it brings it out. So the inclination comes. And that's the importance of what we're talking about here, to create those inclinations, to create a vision, to cultivate a vision, a perspective that is God-centered and God-inspired. When you see the sunset, who is that artist? When you see the beauty of a rose or a gardenia and its fragrance, we are inspired. The very word inspire, its root in Sanskrit means in connection with God. So when we should have experience. Yoga is just not a physical practice or, a chant. It is an experience. It is an experience that will help us to find our conviction to the process, the system, the discipline, because it does require determination and a conviction to a system, a discipline, so that we can cultivate this mindset. If you go to the gym every day, right? Like I have a cousin, he's 2 years younger than me. For the last 35 years, he's been going to the gym 3 times a week, sick, healthy, etc. He has, by virtue of his experience by doing it, he has the conviction to do that, whether he's sick or not. So even within the realm that we're existing in now, we have experience that whenever we apply ourselves to something consistently, with some degree of discipline, then we reap the results of that, the rewards of that. But if we do something for 2 months and say, oh no, this is too much endeavor, then what rewards do we receive? So that's why Bhakti in particular is a system of yoga that gives us the experience, what comes from connection to our natural loving instinct in relationship with God. And who can deny that we have a loving instinct, right? You see a cute puppy, oh, that instinct is there. You see a really good friend, oh, that loving sentiment is there. If you have a good relationship with your parents, when you see them, the whole world of experience is there. And that's why people are troubled when they have a troubled past, because their experience has been placed in their mind, and the samskara, the impression, has been a negative one. So that's for those of you that are parents or grandparents, the importance of relationship with a young person, your grandchild or your child, is so fundamental to the pillars of balance in life, and so destructive to those pillars if it's not there. So, any other questions or comments anyone would like to bring forward? We have 5 minutes left. Anyone have any realization or question about what was being said? 10th chapter will continue along this line, kind of connecting the dots for us. So everything that we see, there was an album in the 70s, late 70s, a friend of mine wrote, and one of the songs is, what was the song? All You See Is Me. And that was like George Harrison's My Sweet Lord, and another song that he wrote, something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. He later said that was about Krishna, and the principle that all you see is me. So he wrote those two songs in relationship to seeing Krishna everywhere, in other living entities, in the flowers, in the landscape, and in so many different ways. So, anyone like to share any realization or any thoughts that you may have had during class?
Hi, Krishna Prabhu.
Yes.
Just wanted to pass and say hi. It's me, Bhaktin Triana.
Anyone? No?
Can you hear me?
Yes, no?
Hello?
Is that you, Triana? Yeah, Triana from Puerto Rico. How are you?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, that is Triana. Okay, if there's
Hare
no
Krishna.
questions or no comments or no realizations,
I have a comment.
I thank you all for taking the time this evening to be with me and to discuss the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, Sid, I'm sorry. You have a comment?
Yeah, but I wanted to say that
You're muted, Sid,
1 second, Sid. For some reason, I'm not getting you.
because in this moment he's muted.
on
Now,
that. Hello?
yeah, go, Sid, go.
Mute. Just to unmute.
Again, you're muted, Sid.
Are you muted or am I muting you?
I'm not muted as we speak.
Because I can't hear you.
Really?
Gokula, can you come in here and help me out?
I can hear you, Sid. Not now. Now,
I can't hear. Can you help me, please?
And we can save it till next week.
Oh, there you go. Got it.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is that Krishna is everywhere, past, present, and future, sees all, knows all. And that's a good thing. Absolutely. And I am,
It's a good friend to have, actually.
yes, I would say so. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sharing it.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Who is that?
My name is Irina, and I'm in Puerto Rico until next week. If Rihanna, she wants to get together, please find me.
Yes. Triana is wonderful.
Rihanna,
Triana.
can you hear me?
I think she left the group, unfortunately.
Oh.
But are you on Facebook?
Yes.
She's on Facebook. Her name is Triana, Triana, Triana de la Cruz, and she lives right in Old San Juan, right in the middle of Old San Juan, and she's a wonderful person. So if you reach out to her, she has a baby. That's probably why she jumped off really quickly. But if you reach out to her via Facebook, she'll tell her you would like to. Where are you staying?
Rio Grande.
Oh, Rio Grande, that's about, was about 45 minutes, I think, from San Juan.
Depends on the traffic.
Yeah. Well, just reach out to her. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you if she can.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to class. Appreciate it. Anything else? If not, I bid you adieu. Have a wonderful, healthy, happy, and holy week. And we'll see you next week, next Wednesday, the same time, 7 p.m. Until then, healthy, happy, and holy. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.